Welcome to the Island Annapolis podcast. I'm Danny Jacobs here with Daily Record State House reporter Alex Piles and Daily Record columnist and WYPR senior news analyst Fraser Smith. And Alex, you were in Annapolis last week for the second special session where the General Assembly passed the bill to expand gambling in the state. The bill passed with almost the minimum amount of votes in the House. How close was it to not passing in the House?
Well, it was the minimum amount of votes. It was 71 once Delegate Holmes from Prince George's County changed his vote after the vote was posted, and it was pretty close up until the vote was taken Tuesday night. The House all week worked on a delayed schedule. They were supposed to go in at I think 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. They didn't convene until sometime after 4. And even then, the debate moved very slowly, and the thought was that was happening because the votes were trying to be rounded up. This thing really didn't have a whole lot of room. I mean, this was not an easily passed bill, not like it was in the Senate at least.
And it seemed like a lot of people held their noses as they voted yes in favor of expanded gambling in the House.
Well, they either held their noses or they waited until they heard the right numbers on the things that were going to be done for them in the way of state spending in their districts.
What about House Speaker Bush? He was against expanded gambling, and he seemed to be the key in passing this in the House.
Yeah, and the Speaker said something the next day at the bill signing with Governor O'Malley that was a little surprising. He said that he started to come around on gambling when he realized that the ballot initiative in 2008, when the casino program was first set up, passed with almost a 60% approval. That was 4 years ago, and the Speaker hasn't been a proponent of gambling in the 4 years coming up till now. So it's interesting that he would use that as his rationale, last week during the bill signing. For why he finally decided to work hard to get these votes. I do think they probably had more than the 71 because of the Speaker's work, but not more than 73, 74 votes. And once folks realized that they didn't need to vote yes, there were plenty of lawmakers who were happy to put a no up on the board.
Right. One of the delegates that changed his vote may have been somebody who had promised if the issue was in doubt that he would be with the Speaker, and when he saw that was not the case, he changed his vote. And I think the other interesting thing is that, at my understanding, I wasn't there, but my understanding is that the Speaker gavelled the issue to a close rapidly so that there wouldn't be any more changes.
He did, and there were a couple of delegates who stood up perhaps to change their vote, and you're right, it was closed off very, very quickly once we got down to 71.
It's hard to, if you're not a member of the House of Delegates or the Speaker, it's sort of a little bit hard to quickly count how many green votes that are there. But my understanding, it's not hard for the Speaker. He's got a digital readout right in front of him that tells him how many green and red votes have come. And, as to what was going on in his mind about this, I think he and the governor both had what I think is going to turn out to be a vain hope, and that is that you get this issue behind the assembly so that they can deal with some other things. I mean, I think we're in a world where gambling is really calling the tune, and I don't think it's going to change. I mean, I think you're going to continue to see issues come up for concessions that these developers want, and as we keep saying, the train has left the station on this. It's not a moral question anymore. It's almost a question of what good care you can take of a government-run industry. It's not so much government-run, but the government is so much involved in it that it has to be concerned about how well it's being maintained.
Let's talk about the governor for a minute. You wrote Friday about the vote and what this means for the governor. What impact does this have on his political present and political future?
Well, I think whatever issue is of importance to the state and to the nation, if in fact he's running for president, and we've all speculated that is the case, he almost can't have any big losses. For example, on the marriage equality bill that will come before the voters in November, I mean, he got that bill through the General Assembly, but I don't think it's over for him there. I think he would probably like to be the governor of the state, which was the first one to approve this with a referendum, which has not happened in any state so far. So that's every one of these issues is important to him, and I think this was another one.
Will having the same-sex marriage initiative on the ballot have any impact on the gambling referendum being on the ballot? In other words, will people who are coming out to vote against the referendum also say, on same-sex marriage, say, there's a gambling initiative, I'm against gambling, I'm going to vote against that too? Would that be an unintended consequence of this bill passing?
Well, it could be. I've heard that there was that concern on the pro-marriage equality side. Their fear was that more conservative-thinking Marylanders would turn out to vote against gambling, and while they were there, they would vote against marriage equality. So we'll see. I mean, it's hard to say.
I think I misspoke. People against gay marriage will vote for the referendum on the ballot, correct? Is that backwards with the gay marriage?
The language, so.
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, the referenda question would be to turn it down, so you'd be voting against rejecting.
How visible was the governor during the gambling special session?
He was there every day, and it was a stark contrast to Governor O'Malley during the regular session of the General Assembly, stark contrast to the governor during the first special session this year. You saw the governor in the galleries of the House and the Senate several times in the, 4 days ultimately that the legislature was in session. Maybe some of his detractors and even some lawmakers could have said during the regular session that O'Malley was not involved enough in the legislative process during the 90 days, but certainly no one could have said that this time around. And even when the governor was not in the room, his staff was. Joe Bryce, who's his chief lobbyist to the legislature, he was in the House of Delegates every moment, every step of the way. And the speaker joked the next day at the bill signing that he and Joe Bryce had talked to every member of the House of Delegates 10 times in the last 2 days. So the governor's influence was certainly there this time around.
The belief at the end of the first special session and the possibility of a second one came along, I think there was a consensus among observers like us that the votes were not there. But old hands would tell you that if you get an issue where the governor, the Senate president, and the House Speaker are all for something, it's probably going to happen. And it wasn't easy, but partly it wasn't easy because when you turn every single vote into sort of, you make every single delegate and senator a powerful person because that person's vote is needed, you end up with a sort of a giant negotiating auction where people are telling you what their price is, basically. And it may not have much to do with whether you want or like gambling. What it has to do with is what you think you can go home to your constituents with.
One of the winners, it seemed, from the session was David Cordish, the owner of Maryland Live. He was singled out by name by the Senate President, Mike Miller, after the session ended. Who else was a winner? And if you talk a little bit about Cordish and what he got out of this.
Well, Cordish is definitely the biggest winner. Cordish developed Maryland Live. It's the state's biggest casino right now. Once all 6 are up and running, assuming that voters approve the Prince George's site, it'll be still the biggest in the state by far, by about 1,000 slot machines. And Cordish, for his trouble, will pay 51% tax on the slot machines. That has the possibility of going down to 49% after Prince George's after the Prince George's casino opens, after a couple of House amendments. And the Senate President said that Cordish effectively lobbied members of the House of Delegates to ensure that his business interests were respected, were taken care of. And it was interesting to see Cordish and his president of the gambling division, Joseph Weinberg. They were present all throughout the end of the regular session when this gambling bill was being talked about. They've been talking about how outrageous it would be to expand the program, the gambling program, all summer long. At the beginning of the special session, they attended hearings, they testified, they made sure that everyone knew that they thought it was a very bad idea to expand the state's gambling program. As soon as the House of Delegates attached these amendments that allowed Cordish to get a larger take of its slot proceeds, you didn't hear a word from Maryland Live. You didn't hear a word from Cordish, and they've been silent ever since. The Senate President says that they've agreed not to fight this thing on referendum. And I asked Joseph Weinberg and I asked David Cordish, is that the case? Are you satisfied? And they ducked the question rather skillfully. So it seems like David Cordish comes away a huge winner. He gets the reduction in the slots tax that he says he needs because the Prince George's facility is going to blow up his market to the south. But there are other winners too. Veterans organizations in the state get to have not slot machines, but slot-like machines, electronic bingo machines that play like slot machines, act like slot machines, but they don't randomly generate numbers. I think that's the only difference. They get up to 5, and they get to use the proceeds from that to fund their operations. And the Ocean Downs Casino in Berlin, near Ocean City, there were a lot of restrictions on their operations. They couldn't have live entertainment. They wanted to be able to really create a better casino experience, but businesses in Ocean City didn't want to allow that because they were afraid it was going to hurt the tourist market in the city. Those restrictions are lifted now, so Ocean Downs gets a lot more, plus a 10 percentage point reduction in their slots tax rate. So there's lots of winners, most of them on the side of the casino operators.
Right, and the casino operators also got table games, which were not authorized before, and I gather that's something. I mean, the mayor of Baltimore said if we just have slot machines, we just have a big barn with slots, which wouldn't be quite as attractive.
And the Caesars folks now get to attract their VIP memberships, which they say members of they're high rollers. In other words, they travel around the country and around the world to Caesars casinos to play these table games. So the city facility, you're right now going to have those table games, and the idea is more people coming in, more revenue for the state and the city, and ultimately Caesars, which also got a big reduction in its tax rate.
So is Penn National the loser?